and welcome to Food for Thought. I'm your host, Ramona Singh, and today we have a very exciting show for you. We're going to talk about what is masculine and feminine energy. Well, if you don't know what that's all about, you'll be very interested in this topic in terms of which one are you leaning more towards, what do you need to do to balance it out, and perhaps who are you attracted to? It's usually the opposite energy, and we're going to talk all about this in today's show, Food for Thought, with Group Editor Yudhvir Jaswal. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Ramona. Thank you so much. The topic looks great, masculine and feminine energy, and we're going to learn a lot more from you today. I'm sure you're an expert in this one. What do you say?
Well, I say I've been working with it for quite some time. The first time I was able to learn about this, it was absolutely life-changing for me. I learned about this about 10 years ago, and I've been working with it ever since, understanding what it is. But just to be clear, so we all have both masculine and feminine energy, but we live in one more than the other. And just like nature versus nurture, there's one type that's more natural for us, and as we've evolved and based on where you live, what your family dynamics are, what your job is, all of those has allowed you to learn the opposite one, which is by your nurture, your environment. And so it's important to know what both are, but it's the most ideal case is if you're able to balance both and not just lean into one over the other. So we're going to go through what the characteristics of feminine energy are and masculine energy, and then perhaps maybe we can guess which one is your natural state and what that means. Does that sound good?
That sounds perfectly fine, and I think our viewers would definitely want to know today. And as Ramona ji is going to explain what are the traits, what are the characteristics of feminine energy, what are the traits and characteristics of masculine energy, so you could check where do you lean on. And as you were explaining it rightly, that yes, you could have a balance of both. You could be leaning to one more naturally, the other one you could be acquiring the traits with your exposure, with your environment, and so many other things. So why don't we start with what is masculine energy?
Okay, so masculine energy is the difference I could say between the two, and just to be able to differentiate it, masculine is doing, okay, and feminine energy is just being.
What does that mean? Explain. Yeah, doing and being. Yeah,
doing and being. Okay, so masculine energy leans in more towards knowledge. Okay. Meanwhile, feminine energy moves into knowing. Two different things. Knowledge is obtained through when it comes to logic, experience, stability. We're talking about so to be able to focus, to have clarity. These are all strengths of the masculine, which allows them to have a roadmap of how to, if the plan is a goal-oriented plan is to get to C, they know they have to go from a linear position from A to B to get to C. And these are all the things that is very masculine: righteousness, willpower, being stable. And for those reasons, when you have a plan, you're a little more predictable. And those are all, if you can define masculine energy. Now we do, and then I'll go into feminine energy. We do have a little graphic that will display both, and it'll give you a better idea of what each one is. And feminine is more about being. It's a lot more unpredictable in a sense, because you flow from one place to another. So feminine energy is more circular. You don't go from a linear place of A to B. So if you can see in the graphic there, you have feminine energy is in being. It's receiving. It's able to receive from the universe, and in terms of being able to law of attraction, we're going to talk about in terms of how it's done through feminine energy. There's also an intuitive mind, such as a feminine energy understands from within, going internal in terms of what to do next, what things mean. Whereas when you look at the masculine energy, which is more on action oriented, which is more doing, it likes to give. Meanwhile, feminine likes to receive. And the difference between the two is when you see feminine energy, as it's intuitive, you have the opposite with masculine energy. That's a logical mind. Logical mind comes from a level of experience. It comes from knowledge. It comes from that level of precision and clarity. And when it comes to what the strengths are, well, the feminine energy is able to draw its strengths by going internal, and that's where the intuitive comes from, and going into the soul. Meanwhile, masculine energy is external. It's more, as it's more action oriented, it's getting things accomplished, and that's how things fall. So now what's very interesting is there you have, when it comes to intuition, you have the fluidity, right? Which is that circular motion of not just going from A to B, but essentially in feminine energy, you can actually go from A to C based on intuition. And there you have, that's why you have to allow it. You have those specific things such as feeling, and you're able to be creative. It's the creative mind. And when it comes to the masculine, you have that difference of projectiveness, being able to focus. These are your words: focus, clarity, planning, all those very masculine energy based. And there you have the imbalance. So what we talked about is you need the harmony of balance. When you're imbalanced and on a feminine side, you're feeling powerless. You're going more into manipulation than towards love. You're going into needy as opposed to being internal and being able to receive from the universe and from oneself. And when it comes to also when you're imbalanced, you're overly sensitive and codependent. What's codependency? When you're depending on others to meet your needs versus yourself. And when you have the imbalancement on masculine energy, you have instead of being able to give and be in that harmony, you're in an aggressive, confrontational, controlling, and micromanaging, competitive, and that's where the imbalancement comes from. So does that give you a good understanding? And the balanced is you want to be able to use both, and we'll go into how you can lean into more of each one based on where you're sitting at or which one you're more operating from.
Yeah, I think this is a very clear picture that you just gave, and I'm sure our viewers will definitely find themselves in one side or the other. But when I was looking at both these things, and I could easily identify more of myself with the masculine side. All those traits, certainly you're right. I mean, whether it's the being focused, whether it's planning, whether it's doing something, all those things I find a lot more. Yes, of course, there is certain things on the other side as well, but this is how I identify myself more. And I'm sure this is the question that we're going to address today, that where you are leaning, what is your natural side, that this is where you lean naturally. And these are certain characteristics. You could pick up all those, nurture all those, and as we move forward, I'll also want to know, even if you are naturally leaning towards one side or the other, maybe masculine or feminine energy, how does it help you? How does it help you to evolve? And what does it mean for your life and anybody around you? So there are many questions coming to my mind. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I want to go with the start of when I first learned about this, which will give you a good understanding of which one I was living in and which one was my natural state. Right. So I was doing opposite of what was my natural state. And so essentially I was at a Date with Destiny seminar. It's a 6-day seminar with Tony Robbins. If you have the time to ever do this, I would highly urge you to go to this. He has it, I'm not sure now, like when in the year, but this was, it's usually towards the end of the year, but I don't know how many times he does it in the year. So definitely look it up. But I was at this 6-day conference with Tony Robbins, and this is one of the few conferences where he does the whole thing himself. So you don't have other people doing his teachings. And he talks about masculine, feminine energy. And for me, this is 2010, or was it 2012, something like that. And it was, for me, it was something so new because, I mean, I've heard of masculine, feminine energy, but I didn't really understand what it was, or even, it wasn't even in my consciousness of like wanting to even know what it is. And when he explained it, saying, and his theory was that, you know, you're definitely, your natural state is in one, and giving all those explanations of what each one as we described it, but then through nurture you learn the second one. And if I had to guess right away, because one of the key things about Tony Robbins seminars are, as he teaches things, you have your booklet and you have to do an exercise on the spot. So as I had to guess, or think, not guess, what am I naturally? I immediately wrote masculine. I was completely wrong about it. I was living in masculine energy for so long, not realizing that my natural state is very feminine. And that had to do with nurture, upbringing. So giving an example, I have 3 other siblings, there's 4 of us, and I'm the second child, so there's 3 girls, and the 4th one is my brother. And my father wanted a son, and so with me, after having like my older sister, with me, he pretty much raised me like a son until, you know, the 4th child was a son. And so essentially, if you imagine, he would buy me toy cars as opposed to dolls. So I'm very good at like building things, because every time he would be building something around the house or doing anything mechanical, he'd always get me to help him, whether it's to hold the like flashlight or to finish something. So I'm very good at you know, putting things together, because I was taught those things very early on, and he always taught me to like really stand up for myself and be vocal and be less shy. And I think the career paths I've chosen in the past while, like I wanted to be a police officer, then I wanted to be in politics, and I wanted in telecoms, and they were, at the time, they were very masculine oriented you know, fields. And one thing I have to clarify is when I say masculine and feminine energy, I'm not talking about men and women. This has nothing to do with your sex, gender. It has nothing to do with it. It's energy, right? And so you could be a male with feminine energy, you could be a female with masculine energy, or female with feminine energy, and vice versa. And so I was living in it for so long, and when I was in the corporate world, in telecoms and all that, I was living in it. And so when Tony Robbins explains, when you're living in the opposite, that's natural to you. So I was I was living in the opposite, and then therefore I was highly imbalanced. He was saying, well, when you wake up in the morning and your energy level is at 100%, you're going to hit you know, that 90% finished by noon. And I would feel that, because I was projecting something that is not, it's learned, right? The other one is learned, and due to the environment. And so then I went through, so when I started really writing at the seminar and really answering questions and going through the thought process, I'm like, no, actually, I'm very feminine. I'm absolutely so feminine. I've just been raised you know, in masculine energy. And in a way, it helped me, because I was able to travel, do all sorts of careers. Like, I was able to do a lot of things when it came to planning and clarity of what my goals are, and precision. Those are all very masculine things. And I was able to nurture a very logical mind that is great in operations and all those technicality things, right? And so what was great was, as I leaned into my feminine, and I had to be very conscious of it, I came up with a name, and it's actually Tony Robbins. He suggested it. He says, you know, and he gave it a really great example. He says, you know, just imagine like an attorney in the courtroom, right? A criminal attorney. Like, when he or she goes home, they're not going to deal with their children and their spouse as an attorney. They're going to have a different side to them. And he explained, you're a multi-dimensional being, right? You're going to have different energies that are required for different things. You're not going to live in just one, because that's just not going to work for you. And so when you need one over the other, name it. So I named my masculine Ramon at the time, and of course my feminine Ramona, because that's my natural state. It was very interesting, because after I went back from that seminar to like my friends and colleagues, I said, you know, I gave, because for me, I needed to have those technical terms to know when I'm in one versus the other. Now, obviously, a decade later, it's much natural, and I even forgot about it until this episode of that alter ego name, and so it really helped me.
Wow, what an interesting thing that you've analyzed. And I'm sure our viewers right now, you must be analyzing what comes naturally to you. Does feminine energy comes naturally to you, or you are naturally leaning towards masculine energy? And we've clearly shown you the traits for that as well. And as we were discussing earlier, I think a balance of both would work. And can anybody be 100% operating with masculine or 100% operating with feminine energy? I doubt so.
That would put you in imbalance, because we do have the energies in us. We do operate in one over the other, but we're looking at like potentially 80% versus 20%, 60-40. You want to be at a balanced stage because you're going to have such a dynamic day in your life, your day to day. You need to be able to draw strengths from both, and so therefore you need to be able to work with some of these energies that are maybe not as natural to you, but you essentially need it to be able to accomplish certain goals. You may need to do it because you want to be able to heal some wounds that you have. Perhaps if you're feminine energy and if you have wounds with a masculine energy, you want to be able to heal some of those to be able to lean into it more, or vice versa. So again, it has nothing to do with being a woman or a man, a male or a female. We're talking about purely energy.
Yeah. As much as I, since you've put the spotlight on all these different traits, and as much as I feel the masculine side, the being very focused, doing something, planning something, and I have to be, because this is my day-to-day job as well. I mean, when I'm playing a game, I love sports. So in sports, you have to plan, you have to be focused. All these things are pretty masculine on that side. And of course, you have to be, although on the downside, it says that yes, you could be a little bit aggressive as well. In sports, you need to be aggressive at times. But I see the other side as well, like being an empath, as you mentioned this many times, or being creative. So I lean on to my creative side, being empathetic on those sides as well. I feel that, I'm not sure, you could explain better. I feel those things also come naturally to me, but maybe I was leaning more towards this side. Why? Because that was the nature of the work that I did. And for many years, being in school, being in college, then being at a job or in business, those are the things which really demanded my masculine side: planning, focused, achieving, goal-oriented, and all these things. That was what was demanded, what was expected out of my life. And in Indian culture now, things are being very different. And I had this one thing very early on in my life. I always told even if my wife could be doing a nice job or a career, but I think at the end of the day, running the affairs of the house, especially financially, I think I should be taking care of that. So that's why all these masculine traits were, I wouldn't say overpowering, but I was leaning a lot more on these ones. But I think I was still the creative side or the empathetic side or those things. I think so they come naturally to me, or not?
Yeah, absolutely they do. And I think you doing this show Food for Thought is you leaning into your more feminine energy, because you're not focused on facts, figures, history. You're going more, like as you sit here, you're going more on intuition,
right.
And that's coming with a flow of energy, right? You're talking about zone zero, which you talked about in many episodes ago, which is being in that state where you're receptive to what's happening. It's you're drawing strength from within, and you're creating right now a show based on your intuition versus in the being, as opposed to what you have to do perhaps on your weekly show, what you have to do with other things, which is a lot more facts, figures, that level of predictability, organization, clarity, that. Do you see the difference of the two different platforms that you're on?
I think I clearly see the difference, because when I'm doing a show, usually I haven't done this show like this, Food for Thought, and I think once again I must give you the credit. You basically explain this concept, why we should be doing a show on Food for Thought. But you're right. I think all these years I've been doing shows on political stuff, which does demand logic, facts, figures, political events or political analysis, or even for that matter, sports is all about numbers. It's all about numbers. You have to be bang on your numbers, like this team performed this much today, this between or players or whatever.
And it's technical.
It's all technical.
Yeah. Very masculine.
Very masculine. Yeah. But here, when I come for doing Food for Thought show, you're right. I think I'm in a totally different zone and more towards. Okay, there's another question that I want to ask you. When I'm doing Food for Thought, I'm a lot more closer towards my zone zero, which I always aspire to be.
Yeah.
So how can this connect more with the zone zero?
Well, because you're going on more of your gut feeling, more intuition. You're drawing from a place of just something that's coming from your internal, not external, right? That's feminine. Feminine's very internal, and masculine is external, which is you studying facts, figures, history, and all that stuff. So that's why. But when you play sports, you're in your zone zero as well.
Yeah.
Right. So these are. It's good because now you're getting a balance of both. and you want to be at that. And I think what essentially the balance gives you the harmony in life, right? It gives you the full fulfillment. So if you're feeling fulfilled as a human being because you're using both your masculine and feminine, then perhaps those are some of the things that you're doing with your week.
You identified, as you just explained earlier in the show as well, you've identified yourself as more from the feminine energy.
Yeah.
Would you want to attribute any percentage to that? And a two-part question on this one. Would you want to attribute any percentage to that how much are you leaning on towards the feminine side and the masculine side? And also, just for our viewers' benefit, if you could like to explain that, how would you want to balance them, or how would it benefit in your life? Please.
Yes. So I find that since I've been more my natural state of feminine, and I'm attracting things at a faster pace, because feminine is receiving, masculine is giving. Masculine energy would be something like make it happen, and feminine energy is like, no, it's just gonna come to me without me having to go out there, struggle, or to hustle. Right? Like there's a lot, if you notice in our society, it seems to lean more into action versus being. It seems to give more of, make you appear like the thought that you're more successful if you're action oriented, if you're hustling hard, if you're a go-getter. Those are all very masculine things. If you're feminine, or if you're leaning more into your feminine energy, maybe you don't identify with that. And that's why it's so important to discuss this today, which is you can actually get things accomplished by essentially receiving through the universe giving it to you, which is what law of attraction is. Masculine way of law of attraction is like, here is a technique, go through these steps and follow it from a linear process. Whereas the feminine version of it is that just because I think about it, I feel it, I project those feelings, and I feel it inside, then therefore it comes to me without me having to go out there on into the world or external way. Does that make sense? Am I being clear on how I'm explaining that?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And the sense that I got from your explanation is this, that yes, as much as we cannot really discount the masculine aspects, but we got to take full advantage of the feminine aspects as well. How I'm putting across is that, yes, for me, this is what I got from your discussion. You cannot really rule out being focused. Yes, you have to be focused. You cannot rule out planning is important, because if you don't plan, things could go wrong. Being focused is important, planning is important, belief is important. All these masculine traits, they are important. Hard work is important. You have to work hard. You can't just sit and expect with law of attraction everything will happen, but nothing actually happens on its own. Yeah, but on the other side, lean in or draw strength from your masculine traits, which could be, yes, don't get desperate for anything, right? So being, I like that word, being. So
being is feminine.
Being is feminine, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I like the word so once I've, yeah, you're right. So once I've finished all these traits, doing, planning, focus, I'm not going to discount all this, because I still believe these are very important traits. But as you earlier mentioned, that yes, a balance of both. So I think, first of all, planning, focus, hard work, believing yourself, all these things are pretty important, but don't add desperation to it. Don't get desperate, don't try to make it happen. So now, after all these things, do your part, lean into the feminine side, being, okay, receiving, and as much as we're doing all these things, don't get desperate. Yes, now the law of attraction will start working for you, and you'll be on the receiving end, and you'll attract a lot more better things. You don't have to be aggressive, which is the negative trait you told about the masculine side. You don't have to be manipulative, which could be the negative trait of the feminine side. So these things won't come into you. You'll be always the best of these two zones. Is that right?
Yeah, and I want to say, so when it comes to feminine, Mother Earth, right? Okay. We call her Mother Earth. There you go, Earth. We call her Mother Earth. And so a big part of feminine is creation and death, understanding when a cycle is over. Because as much as there's staticness with feminine, and male is action, getting things done. And so in terms of feminine, if you feel like you're in one, like just like the seasons, right? The seasons are not for 10 days. It could be, they're for 4 months. And sometimes in Canadian weather, it could be longer than 4 months. But it's not overnight, right? There's a cycle of things, right? And that's very feminine. And so So whereas masculine is, get go action, and that clarity, that focus, and one step over the other. So what's important is feminine understands creation and death, which is it could destroy what's not necessary to be able to make room for new things to come in. You need to be able to nurture all that within you, because since I have, life is so much easier. Whereas when I was living in masculine all the time, it was so like strategy, implementation, analysis. And when I go into feminine, it's very intuitive. There's certain things that I do that come really naturally when I lean into the intuition that actually turn out much better. They're both good, but for me, they turn out much better, the final product, the final creation. And yeah, I would have to say that.
Just to add to your point, I think really like the conversation that we're doing right now. We're right at a very interesting point right now. Just to move a little bit further, as you were explaining, all these things that we discussed earlier on the masculine side, they are very important. But what happens is, certain times you see motivational videos, the desire in you, the fire in you. Desire is fine, but then desire makes you like as if you're desperate. Okay, desire in you, the fire in you, the motivational video, you have to achieve something, the targets, the focus, all these things. Yes, and you're right. As much as you might believe that these are the only driving force, this could be a part of the driving forces, but these are not the only driving forces within you. Now you start leaning on the creative side as well. Now you start leaning on the empathetic side, the compassionate side of yourself, which you write. Then what happens is that yes, you are seeking happiness, or you're seeking good things in your life. You're seeking.
You just, because you're being, you are happy. You're not seeking happiness. That's masculine energy.
Yeah.
Being happy by just as is feminine. So that's why one is internal, the other one is external. That's why if you want to lean in more to your energetic, feminine energy, move your body, stretch, dance, go more into, as opposed to being in your head and outside your head, which is what you do because you're calculating risk. That's masculine. Survival, that's masculine. When you want to give, you have to be able to know what to give, right? These are all masculine. So you're really outside of yourself, calculating what's going on, and maybe more in your head. Feminine is more in the body.
Yeah, and you're right. And this another points to another very good direction that you just mentioned. And I think you've pointed me in our conversations very early on as well, in my life as well. I've already seen that a game-changing thing for me, especially when I learned it from Buddhaji, my wife Preji, and I think you've also alluded to those points as well. As much as all these masculine things, they will drive you towards success, or maybe till a certain extent towards happiness as well. But then at the end of the day, our happiness or our peace of mind will always, this is what I think so, I think will always or most of the time come from the feminine side, the compassion, the giving, and more importantly, I think happiness, and this is another thing that I've learned over a few years, success, happiness, achievement. What is more important than success? What is more important than happiness? What is more important than achievement? The feminine side that you just mentioned, being empathetic, being compassionate, giving, and very important trait, and you tell me this is masculine and feminine, I don't know. I think out of all these things, even more than being happy, the purpose of life. I'm not sure, I think it's, but when I read all these things, I think it's more leaning towards finding the purpose of life. If you have a purpose of life and you're doing something for purpose of life, happiness, happiness isn't permanent as well. Can anybody tell me that I'm happy forever? I don't think so. You can't be happy forever. There'll be ups and downs in your life. Happiness, you'll have different states of happiness. But I think the purpose of life, that is one thing which will keep you most of the time in your zone zero. Most of the time you are in a bliss. That's what I think so. And I think creativity, giving, being compassionate, being empathetic, and I think all these things are towards the feminist traits.
Yeah. I do want to clarify one thing. Giving is masculine, receiving is feminine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So giving is masculine.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's so for example, if you want to provide, if you want to protect, if you
Okay.
want to secure, if you want, yeah, those are all masculine energy.
Right.
And then feminine is receiving, being able to be open to it and allow it to come with flow. And that's why it's circular, understanding that and that's why there's a lot of unpredictability with feminine energy, whereas there's a knowing. And once when you know something, you could then, it's not stable because then you'll know other things and it'll open up other windows of things. Whereas masculine is just very knowledge based on experience, based on studies, based on calculations, based on a model, to follow because you want precise results. And that's the difference. But yeah, the major difference is masculine is giving, feminine is receiving. If you ever have a problem receiving gifts or compliments, then understand that you need to work on your feminine energy a bit more because, so for example, there was a time where it was hard for me to receive, and it wasn't until a friend of mine said, well, actually it makes me feel good if I can give. So you're at least doing me a favor by receiving. And then I said, yeah, you're right. If somebody wants to give, allow them to give by receiving and saying thank you, right? So that's the difference there.
All right, and I think a balance, as you were mentioning earlier as well, I think a balance of both the things will work. So I think the purpose of life or the happiness, being in bliss, lies in maintaining the balance,
Yes.
the giving and receiving, both the things. I think the balance would really work. Can you discuss a little bit more on this one, how our viewers can really benefit and how they can really balance on their energies?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I think it's to ask yourself, what are you living in more? What is your natural state? And sometimes you could guess one, but with deeper thought, it's probably the other, what I went through. And then understanding, oh my goodness, this is my natural state. This is what I'm comfortable in. I'm living in the opposite, and I have a massive balance, which will turn into physical ailment. You'll get tired. You'll lose, your energy gets drained. These are all things that you need to start focusing on. Are you less in harmony? Are you less fulfilled? That's you not being balanced. And so how do you lean into it? I want to go back to that screen that we had with the graphic, just to give you, now that we've gone a little more detail. So you have the feminine energy, and being mode is you want to be able to feel grateful and still. So meditate, get more into your body, whether it's through dancing, stretching, doing something that's physical that makes you come back into yourself, which is what you do when you're playing sport. Right. You're actually going into your physical being and in that state. Yeah. And then intuitive mind, you want to be able to rely on your gut feeling. It's okay. It's usually right. Your gut feeling, regardless, if it sounds irrational, it's perhaps, you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be making this. I'll go into intuitive in a bit. I wanted to go to this stage just to remind you that when you're in balance, you get that powerlessness, you go into manipulative mode, you're needy, you're oversensitive, codependent. So those are very key words. On the masculine side, when you're imbalanced, you're aggressive, you're confrontational, you're controlling, you're micromanaging, you are competitive, you want to control the outcome because you believe it's through action that you can just have it all and do it all, and that's it. So we can go back to that. So now intuitive. It's very important to rely on your intuition, and it's that. Okay, so what's intuition? It's that voice, or that gut feeling, or that just knowingness of something, and it may sound completely irrational. It may sound illogical. Is illogical a word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Irrational, illogical. I just didn't know if I was using the proper opposite term. And so, but sometimes when you follow your intuition, you could actually have the most magnificent, beautiful thing happen in your life, just because it didn't make sense before you did it, but as soon as you did it, you got so much out of it. And that's really relying on your intuition. I actually learned the hard way to rely on my intuition, and I'll share the story. The hard way was this. It's 2014, and I was in Barcelona. I was there every year for the Mobile World Congress. It's a massive convention It's about 4 days, and on average, 100,000 people from around the world go there and talk about mobile everything, technology, mobile everything. And so I had to go to that conference because I was in telecoms at the time, and so that was probably the 6th or 7th year I was there, and so I understood the ins and outs of the city. And 100,000 people just go to the conference, but there's so many more people who come to the city and don't go to the conference because there's so many meetings and events and dinners, and this is when you can, if you're doing international business, this is where you're going to meet people that you've been emailing with, or at the time Skyping, or now it's Zoom, but through virtual, and now this is a chance to meet, to take the business relationship to another level, or whatever the case is. And it's a great networking opportunity as well as so your days, so the way those days are, like your days are full of meetings, maybe 10, 15 meetings, and then your evenings, you're at events, whether your company's hosting an event and inviting, other companies for networking, or you're going to multiple, like in an evening you could go to 3 or 4 networking events and dinners and hosted events. And so it was day one, and this time, so you need to book your accommodations very early, hotel, and our Airbnb was becoming popular then, or whatever, the service apartment. So in that year, my company had booked a service apartments where, it was an apartment. And in that building, we had, I think, 6 or 7, because we had a big team go to this conference. And so mine was a 2-bedroom, and I was sharing with my 2 other female colleagues. And so day one comes, I come back to my, apartment, and we had an hour. We were given an hour. By the time I got back from the meetings and the convention, I had an hour to meet in the lobby because we were going to dinner, and then we had a whole night of events to attend. And so I'm changing and I'm getting ready, and I turned to my colleague Victoria, who is she was the chief marketing officer, who essentially booked this whole thing. And I saw that our rooms were clean, and I said to her, and I had this really feeling, and I didn't know what the feeling was, but I was very uneasy. And I said to Victoria, so they already cleaned? She goes, yeah, you see it's clean. I said, yeah. So I'm asking questions because I'm trying to use my logical mind to say, they already cleaned, no one's gonna come into this space later on because they've already done their stuff. But I was so uneasy with my handbag, with my stuff. So what I did was, and this is something that's very rare. So next to my bed was a bedstand, a nightstand, and then it had a little cupboard. So I took my handbag and I put it in there, almost wanting to hide it. And I was very uneasy, but I was short on time. I had to meet downstairs because, you don't want to miss the taxis, and it's all your colleagues are waiting for you. So I run downstairs, and I was very uneasy. I tried to hide my handbag, which made no sense because I've been to this city at that time probably 25 times. It's a city I love, Barcelona, great city, visit it, it's amazing. And so it didn't reach until 9:30 or 10 p.m. We were at some networking event, and we get a call from Victoria, who had headed back to the apartment, and she calls us we were robbed. And so we go back, literally everything of mine was taken. Everything from shoes and suits and makeup and perfume, everything. I was just left with the clothes I was wearing, my handbag that I hid. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the feeling I had. I was so uneasy, asking her silly questions like, oh, so they're already clean. No one's gonna come in here, right? We're not expecting any, service. And then she was just like, yeah, everything's okay. So what happened to her is she came back to the room. She's like, I went straight to the bathroom, and she goes, when I was in the bathroom, I heard the front door close. She's like, I came out, and that's when I realized our whole place was robbed, and literally everything was gone. And then that's when I realized, okay, that was your intuition. So next time, learn to follow your intuition. I mean, in that case, what would you do? Not go out? But there was no break-in from the window or the front door. There was no break-in. The how you get into that building was through a code, and then you had cards, the pass cards for your room. So it was very interesting. But after that, I always followed my intuition, even if it didn't make sense.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. But maybe someone from within did that.
Perhaps.
Because you're saying there wasn't any break-in. Someone
Yeah.
already knew the code or
Yeah.
something like that. But as you were mentioning, yes, your gut feeling came true, and most of the time it does. Scientifically also, our gut has a brain of its own. It does have a brain of its own. Why? Because when a child is in its mother's womb, you know what happened is even before the brain is fully developed. So for feeding purposes, for other purposes, there's a small tiny brain in the gut itself. That's what keeps things going. So our gut does have a brain, does have some sort of logic. That's what we can call intuition. But of course, our brain has developed a lot more. And then we start using our brain, and that's how we start leaning towards our feminine energy or masculine energy. That's the discussion that we're having today. So anything you want to add to our viewers, how they could identify, how they could benefit, and you've benefited a lot. It's been a game changer for you. How they can really benefit from this?
Absolutely. I would say, ask yourself the questions, go through some of these criterias. And what I want to stress is food for thought is not the full version of what you need to know to master anything. What we do is we try to talk about some of these subjects to be able to inspire and be thought-provoking, and therefore there's a lot more research analysis and a lot more to learn on these, and there's so much more to learn on this. But perhaps if this has sparked an interest, figure out which energy is more natural, which one are you living in, and it doesn't have to do anything to do with being male or female. This is just energy we're talking about, masculine or feminine energy. And then, of course, ask a friend, ask your partner, ask people close to you, ask your family members to help you through the process of understanding, what are you naturally in, and are you in any imbalance, and then you got to start working towards it with some of those.
Yeah, and you rightly said, so our food for thought, one of the prime reasons was that, yes, to start discussing some thought-provoking ideas, and I think this is not numbers, this is not logic. So, and I don't think so, at least I don't claim to be the guru or any sort of expert on all these things. These are just our thoughts that we're sharing with you. How could we benefit from all these things? And it's basically to encourage you, inspire you, motivate you, and mainly thought-provoking. So figure out what you want in your life, figure out which side are you leaning in more, whether it's the masculine energy or the feminine energy, and how you can benefit from being in balance. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much, Ramana, for sharing all these things.
Thank you so much. And you know what? One of the most important things that I wanted to start in the beginning of our conversation, and now I'm going to add it to the end, is when it comes to where you're leaning more towards and what energy, you're attracted to the opposite. So
Okay.
just remember that. I know this is a big thing, and I'm putting it right at the end.
Right.
But it's so if for example, if I have feminine energy, which I lean in towards, I'm going to be naturally attracted to masculine energy of somebody else.
Of
So
somebody else.
somebody else, exactly.
Not the masculine
opposites
energy.
attract. Opposites attract.
Okay.
Exactly. So for example, if I'm naturally feminine, I'm not going to be attracted to another feminine energy. We're not talking about male or female. We're talking about energy. So when it comes to your partner, your spouse, we've done many episodes on how to pick the right partner. This is a very key thing. Based on what you are, you're going to be attracted to the opposite.
And does it benefit if you're attracted to the opposite, or just in case
You have no control.
you no control? Huh?
No, you're just attracted to the opposites attract.
Okay.
Yeah.
You no control over that.
No, it is the way it is. Now, what you want to be careful of is you don't want to be in a situation where you're masculine naturally, you're living way into your feminine energy, your masculine energy naturally, you're living way into your feminine energy, and you have that imbalance, and now you're attracted to somebody who is naturally living in the opposite as well, because that's going to be a big surprise. Or, for example, somebody's living in, okay, let me make a better example, okay?
Please.
So Ramona, I'm feminine, and in that case of over a decade ago, I was living in my masculine energy more. So for example, you don't want to make a mistake where you are now attracted to somebody who is also projecting feminine energy, but is naturally masculine, because then you're going to have a big disappointment after you spend some time with them. So the opposites always attract.
how would you know for the other person? Maybe I think most of our viewers are trying to figure out right now which energy are they leaning into, and here you're telling them try to figure out your partner's energy as well.
Well, no, you don't need to figure it out. You already are attracted to the opposite. You just, but you'll know if your partner is living in the other one more, creating an imbalance. You'll just know. Like we talked about some of this stuff, and just by you maybe I'm leaning more into my feminine energy, saying you're just gonna know. You're just gonna be. I get it. And you're asking masculine energy questions, which is how, what, where, where's the clarity? I get it. You're right. I get it.
All right.
I get it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that wonderful insight. And I'm sure our viewers are going to learn a lot more today into this masculine and feminine energy. And this is really thought-provoking episode today. I'm glad that we could do that. Thank you so much, Ramona-ji, and your final thoughts now.
My final thoughts are that, you know what, it's always a best time use when you spend it on yourself and you go internal and you delve deep and you go to the depths of your soul and you look into the shadows, and I promise you never come out disappointed or any of that. It's like going to the gym. You're never going to leave the gym thinking, oh, I wasted my time. Why did I do this? You're never, ever, ever going to feel that. If anything, you don't want to go to do something, but then after you do it, you feel great. It's one of those things, and that's what I want to leave you with in terms of masculine and feminine energy. I urge you to know more about it, look into it, figure out where you're leaning more towards. What do you need to learn? Maybe you need to learn the opposite energy more to bring more balance into your life, and I always think it's a great use of time to do that. And thank you so much, and always a pleasure to be with our audience for Food for Thought. Thank you. Until next week, stay well and take care.
Thank you. Thank you.